Hi, and welcome to That's Ready Mysterious. Join me for an intriguing look into real-life mysteries. Who was the mad gasser of Mattoon? What was whaling at the Wilga waterhole? I'm not going to solve those mysteries, but they'll be interesting to learn about. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. Transcripts and references for all episodes can be found at that'sreadymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about the Oseberg Viking ship. The Oseberg was one of the most important discoveries from the Viking time, which dated from about 800 to about 1000. Strangely, inside the Oseberg Viking ship they found two women buried in a very opulent fashion. This find completely changed our understanding of women's roles in Viking societies. But even to this day, we don't know who the two women were. In 1903, Oscar Ramm purchased farmland from his neighbor, Lily Oseberg. While tilling the land, he came across an intricately carved wooden fragment. Ramm contacted Gabriel Gustafsson at the University of Oslo to tell him about his find. What he discovered would end up leading to one of the best finds of the Viking Age. It was discovered in August of 1903. The Oseberg was found within a large mound, or haugr. The mound was 40 meters, or a little over 131 feet long, and 6.5 meters, or a little over 21 feet wide. Gustafsson began the excavation on the farm in southeastern Norway in a hamlet called Slagen, which is not far from Oslo, in 1904. During the excavation, it became clear to Gustafsson that the mound had been previously plundered. There were no precious metals left within. However, what they found was still amazing. The Oseberg is a 9th century Viking ship. It was probably built between 800 and 820 and was later dragged ashore for burial purposes. The ship is built primarily of oak. It sits about 21.5 meters or 71.5 feet long by 5.1 meters or 17 feet wide at its widest point. The Oseberg was built to be either sailed or rowed. The mast originally stood 9 to 14 meters or 30 to 45 feet high. There are 15 oar holes on each side of the ship, allowing for up to 30 rowers at a time. When fully manned, the Oseberg could reach top speeds of a little over 5 meters per second or 10 knots. The prow of the Oseberg is carved into a serpent's head and the stern is carved into a serpent's tail. Just behind the mast, the archaeologists discovered a burial chamber lined with a woven tapestry. Inside was a wooden bed with linen and the remains of two women. The wood that was used to build the chamber dated to 834. Originally, because of the time period when the ship was found and the rampant misogyny of the time, it was believed the burial had to be for men. It soon became obvious, however, that the ship lacked the weapons and artifacts usually buried with the males of the day. The burial mound included two women, several animals, including 13 horses, 4 dogs, and 2 oxen, and various objects that had been ornately decorated. It's believed the animals were sacrificed to the two women. The objects included 3 wooden sleighs, embroidered textiles, combs, tools, a wooden cart, and a Buddha bucket, which had a handle decorated with 2 people sitting in the lotus position on each side. There were 30 oars buried with the ship, all made of pine and painted. There was no visible wear on the oars, signifying they were likely built specifically for the burial. The wet clay and rocks both crushed and preserved the ship. It was excavated from the mound and reassembled for display in Oslo. The excavation took less than 3 months. The restoration and reconstruction took more than 20 years. Today, the ship is more than 90% the original wood. It's believed the Oseberg was pulled ashore to bury the two women. A full-scale replica of the Oseberg was built in 1987 and set out to sea. It sank, which led researchers to believe that the Oseberg was never intended to be seaworthy. However, scans of the hull were completed in 2006, and those scans showed that the replica was not built properly. A second replica was built in 2012 based on the scans, and that replica, named Saga Oseberg, launched from the harbor at Tonsberg, and it did sail. This showed that the Oseberg was likely seaworthy. The Oseberg was the world's richest Viking burial ever found. The older of the two women inside died sometime between the ages of 70 and 80. The younger of the two women was likely about 50. The women were both 153 centimeters, or about 5 feet tall. For a long time, the older woman was believed to have been Queen Åsa, grandmother of Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway. Harald I defeated other Viking chieftains and consolidated much of Norway. He ruled between 860 and 940. It was believed the younger woman was a servant of Queen Åsa's who may have been killed to accompany her queen in death. However, more recent studies have led researchers to believe that the two women may have had equal standing in their community. It's possible they were both rich merchants or high priestesses. Today, it's generally agreed that we don't know who the women were. They seem to have both enjoyed a rich diet which would have been reserved for the elite in society. The older woman died from either breast or abdominal cancer. She had osteoporosis and spinal stenosis. She would have suffered a serious illness in childhood. In adulthood, she suffered a knee injury which would have caused her to limp. She may have had a hormone disorder that caused facial hair growth and a deep voice. She was overweight. Her bones were radiocarbon dated to about 1220 plus or minus 40 years prior, which matches the timeline of when researchers believe the ship was buried. She wore a fine woolen red dress. The younger woman had had a collarbone break shortly before her death. Originally, this was thought to confirm the fact that this was a ritual killing, but now it's thought otherwise because there were no other broken bones and the collarbone was healing at the time of death. Her teeth showed a good diet, including meat. They also showed that she had used a metal toothpick, which would have been a luxury at the time. Her cause of death could not be determined. Her bones were radiocarbon dated to 1230 plus or minus 40 years prior, which again matches the timeline. She wore a simpler blue woolen dress. The women's rich diet and elaborately decorated grave goods indicate that the two women were well respected within their community. It's possible they were important politically or religiously. Finding the Oseberg had provided the researchers with a much-needed understanding of women's standing within Viking cultures. In 1904, Norway was not an independent country. It was under a personal union with the Swedish crown, which meant that Norway had its own government but shared a monarch with Sweden. The discovery of the Oseberg was extremely important because it was a reminder of when Norway was independent, and it led to an increased demand for Norway to again become independent. The ship is seen as a Norwegian national symbol. The Oseberg is currently housed at the Viking Ship Museum, where two other Viking ships are also on display, the Gokstad and the Tun. The Viking Ship Museum is located in the Big Døy Peninsula at 35 Haugr Avenue. It is open daily with hours changing depending on the season. Admission is 25 Norwegian krone. In 2025, a new museum surrounding the Oseberg will be opening. It will be called the Museum of the Viking Age. Who were the two women buried in the Oseberg? What importance did they have in their communities? What do you think? Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Thanks for listening to today's episode of That's Ready Mysterious. Join me next week for another captivating mystery.